So this is just what you want to know, like the word semicircle. You want to know when you need a hemisphere. And all you're doing is using the same formula that you would have used for circle and cutting it in half for the semicircle. You're gonna do the same thing for sphere and then cut it in half for the hemisphere. So this one in example number 4, it kind of looks like it could be like maybe like a trash can or something like that, like so, or a bullet, something with this kind of hemisphere dome shape in a way. So if you see something like this, it's saying that the first step always is to identify the solids. So whether it's just as simple as this one that says find the volume of the figure, or if it's some of the ones like we said that they're describing the silo, you still have to say to yourself, this is a composite figure, which means it's made up of more than one. What are the shapes that I'm looking at? So for this one, there's 2. There's a cylinder, and then there's a hemisphere. So they have the 2 formulas first as step number 1. The volume of the cylinder is the pi r squared with height. Then the volume of the hemisphere, they took the sphere, which is 4/3 pi r cubed, and they put the 1/2 on the outside of it. So now this is them writing a formula, of course. You can do it however you want to do it. So if you just want to take we said convert 4/3 into 1.333, and say pi r cubed. And then when you get that answer, cut that in half. As long as you're remembering to do that, you can do that. Or you can actually write it out as a formula how they have here. If you do this though, what you're remembering is to do the order of operations, right? You have to put the original formula in parentheses, which means do that first. And then you're taking the 1/2. Because if you just do 1/2 times 4/3, it's gonna take 1/2 of 4/3 only, and not 1/2 of the whole sphere formula. So that's what you have to remember, is to put your parentheses in if ever you need to do the semicircle or the hemisphere. So in step number 2, you're just taking the information from the drawing to replace or substitute like you were doing in algebra. So if the diameter is 12 going across, the radius is going to be 6. So for a cylinder, they put 6 for R. In the hemisphere, they also put 6 for R. Then in the cylinder formula, you also need the height, which is the 15 centimeters. In the hemisphere formula, you don't need the height. So what they did was they just did the order of operations for the cylinder to get about 1,696.5 cubic centimeters. And then they did the order of operations for the hemisphere to get about 452.4 cubic centimeters. And then step number 3 is to add the 2 volumes that you got, and then that will give you the volume of the composite solid. So what we are going to do is just take a look at these 2 that are in the Think About Math section. So did anybody have a chance to look at these already?
No.
Perfect.
I did that.
So I just closed mine by mistake. We will look at them together. So number 1, we're going with thinking about the steps all of the time. So like we saw in the example, the first step is to just identify what you're looking at, right? So this says this is a storage unit. A storage unit has the dimensions shown. What is the volume of the storage unit? So now you're looking at what would you have to actually figure out? So what 2 shapes is this storage unit?
It's a square and a triangle.
And a pyramid.
They are solids, right? So it's going to be like the rectangular prism, which is definitely at the base, and then a pyramid at the top. So you need those 2 formulas. So what is the volume formula for the rectangular prism, or, you know, a box?
It's 1/3 times base times height.
Yep, that is the top shape, right? That's the pyramid, because the pyramid is kind of like the rectangular prism, right? So what we said about the silo was that the cylinder and the cone are similar in that the cylinder has a formula and the cone is 1/3 of that formula. This is the same. The pyramid is 1/3, right? So you have to figure out the base and the height, but then you're taking 1/3 of that. For the base, that's a rectangle, you're doing length times width times height. So you're figuring out those two things, and then you're going to add them together. So take about 2 minutes, since we have those two formulas. You're going to do volume of the pyramid, volume of the rectangle, and then I will put the two formulas on the whiteboard.
I did it with another one.
With a different formula?
Yep.
Which formula did you do?
I put 1/3, I think it is.
Length times width times height?
Uh-huh.
That's fine.
Oh, okay. And I finished that, but I wanted to wait until everybody's done.
So this is the same thing. So what we're saying is the base times the height, you already would do length times width. So that capital B was just one technique for finding volume. But the truth is you could also do, the one that was in the book is just showing you length times width times height. So it gave you the prism, length times width times height, and it also gave you the pyramid, 1/3 of length times width times height. Those two are actually the same things, because when you do the base, like say here, for the pyramid, the base is 9 times 9. So if you say I want to just multiply base times height, you're going to do the 9 times 9 and then say times height. If you do the length times width times height, the length is 9, the width is 6, and the height, I'm sorry, the length is 9, the width is 9, and the height is 6 again. So it ends up being the same thing. And if it's easier to remember, just keep it at length times width times height. The same thing we said about the silo, right? So this one, is coming up, but they're doing surface area. So the same thing that we said when we did the one about the farmer in his silo, we said you've got the pi r squared with the height, and then you have 1/3 pi r squared with the height. If it's easier just to remember length times width times height, keep it at that one.
Okay.
Because we're trying to remember the least amount of stuff as possible. So you're gonna probably still have the correct answer. So we could say either one of these. Oops. So for the pyramid, we have, if you're thinking of what is the length, you've got $10.
6,
Oops.
5, 60, and 60.
480.
So you're going to say the 10 times the 6 times the 5. If you were doing the base times the height, then you're just translating it as 60 because you already figured out the base, and then you're doing the height. So it's going to come out to being the same amount because you're either going to say, when you do this length times width times height, you're going to say 10 times 6 is 60 times 5 anyway, right? So these two things are the same thing. But now what you're saying is 1/3 of that amount. So if you said 60 times 5 is 300.
That's 100.
Exactly. You're getting that it's again about 100, right? And this just depends if you're saying 0.3, 0.333, 0.3333, you know, so you might have come a little bit lower at 99, depending on how you convert your 1/3. So my suggestion from yesterday was to use at least 3 to get to the 0.333. But it depends on what you put into the calculator, right? So now you have the volume of the rectangular prism. So here you have to say that the height is now how much?
That is 8, I believe.
Exactly. So that's the thing that's changing. 8 times 10 times 6. So for this one, you've got 480. And what you're doing is adding up the 2 in order to come up with your total amount. So you should have 480 somewhere plus the 99 or about 100, however you added that up. And it should be clear that you're going to pick out B.
Yes. So I have a 580 then.
Yep, that's perfect.
So I did the other one, but I don't know where the paper is. I always do that.
But you got the right answer.
I'm sure that is, hold on, I'm sure it's the C.
So
I
the
did
answer
number 2 too.
is B.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
So now this is the thing. When you come up with the
All right,
580, you want to say to yourself, now all of these have cubed at the end, right? So that's a clue that they're all volume. But you have to be careful about picking out your answer because maybe you have a 580 cubic feet and a 580 square feet, right? So you want to make sure that you're picking out the right thing out of the multiple choice. And it's not going to be into the thousands, but you can see what are the answers of A, B, C, and D. A.
Oh, no, it's a C. It's a C. I put C.
No, but it's B.
Oh, no, hold on.
Oh, it's D, right?
You said
I'm
580.
wrong. Forget it. Forget it.
You said 580. So I believe you want to pick B. But what's the difference? A is without the pyramid, right? A is just the 480 that we got. B is now the 480 with the 100, the 1/3 of 300, right? And then C and D, for some reason, are just into the thousands. So you have to just make sure that so now you've got 4,800 and 5,800. So the answers are fairly similar, but this is why you're going in predicting, right? Even if you didn't figure out the pyramid and you just said 8 times 10 times 6, when you do 8 times 10 times 6 and get 480, it can't be A, right? That's impossible. Because you already know you have another piece of a shape to add in. So just starting with, if you think that the box is easier, you can start with the box instead of starting with the pyramid and say, okay, well, 8 times 10 times 6 is 480, so it has to be more than that. That automatically eliminates A. But I know that a pyramid is 1/3 of a box. So it's also not going to be C and D when I add just that little tiny piece of a pyramid. So by default, you're going to pick out B in a multiple choice test. Is everybody following me?
Yes.
Because this is your prediction mind, right? Saying, I'm going to start with length times width times height. That's the easiest formula that I know. That's 10 times 6 times 8. I got 480. It can't be 4,800 when I add a pyramid. And it can't be 5,800 when I add a pyramid, so it has to be B. Even without doing the actual arithmetic for the pyramid. So if you didn't know that formula, if you forgot it, you can still use what you do know for process of elimination in multiple choice tests. And what we said about taking the test is, if you get an open-ended question on math, maybe you're gonna get 2 or 3 or 4 of those, depending on what test you get. You could flag all of those and do those last. And say, let me stay in the mindset of doing multiple choice style first, of what are they asking me? What do I know to start with? What can I predict? What can I eliminate? And then let me make my choice in multiple choice, and then go to the ones that are open-ended when you feel like you've done the majority of the test.
Can you move a little bit the screen to see the top?
Sure. Of the
If it
question?
takes- Yes, please. All right. Hold
Yep.
on. Okay. So in other words, it says that I have to use the same picture to the second question? Or
No,
not?
this is now,
Necessarily.
this
That's
second
another
question is completely different. They just did
Ah,
not
okay,
give you a
okay.
diagram. So
All right.
now this one you could draw on scrap paper if it does help. Or, you know, the purpose of doing all of these examples when you're only probably going to get 1 on your test, or let me not say that. You might get 2 or 3 that are like this. But the purpose of doing all of the examples is to try to use those in your imagination.
Ah,
So
okay.
this one is an observatory, is in the shape of a cylinder, right?
Oh,
With
yes.
a radius of 10 centimeters and a height of 11. The top of the observatory is a hemisphere. So this is what we said could be like the planetarium. You know, you have to have something circular to give you that effect of looking at the stars, right? So what they're describing is the shape that we already looked at. You've got a cylinder with a hemisphere on top. That was kind of like this one. That we said maybe that could be a trash can, maybe that's a block, maybe it's still like the water domes in some kind of way, right? So what you're saying is some of the other examples of what does a hemisphere look like on top of another shape, like the cylinder, you're trying to use those other examples to help you imagine, because in this case, they don't give you a drawing. So you're still saying, but they did tell you the 2 shapes, right? So you know that step number 1 is to identify the 2 shapes. One is going to be the formula for cylinder, and one is going to be the formula for hemisphere, which just so happen to be the ones from example number 4. So you're using, in step number 1, you're using these same 2 formulas, but now you're using it with the information from number 2. So I'm going to say same thing. You can draw it if you want, or you can just borrow the view of the example number 4. And now you're looking for the height and the radius to replace in those 2 formulas. So take 3 minutes, see if you can come up with the total, and then we'll do this one together on the whiteboard. So they kind of identified the shapes for us in this one.
Then this hemisphere.
So what is the radius?
10.
Right, so you don't need to do anything, right? Like we did in example number 4, they gave us the diameter. So we did have to cut the diameter in half to get the radius. But this one is just telling us that the radius is 10. So we can use the 10 in the formula. And then what is the height?
11.
11, right? So for this one, we're already saying pi. We know the 10 times 10 is 100. So we already know we're looking at 1,100 and then times pi. So we've got about so now just looking at this, right? So far, if we're looking at A, if you can still see A on your printout or on your computer, what are we eliminating?
A, B.
And C, right? The 3,454 is just the cylinder. So everything less than that, you can eliminate, and then the answer has to be D.
I got that one.
But we're still gonna figure out the hemisphere because this is class. But for you, I'm saying, for your test, if you're starting with, I know the cylinder formula, even if I don't know the hemisphere formula like that, I don't remember that it's 4/3 and r to the 3rd power, just the process of elimination can help me. If I say I know cylinder and I got 3,454, the volume has to be more than that because it's a composite figure again. So I can eliminate anything less than that. I can eliminate the actual cylinder and I have to pick D. Now, maybe on your test, it might even come out to be 2 things, right? That are more than that, but you still at the minimum have a 50-50 chance of guessing correctly. So what I'm saying is always, start with what you know, like we did in number 1. If I got 480 for my cube, it has to be more than that in order to add another part of the composite figure, but it's also not going to be 10 times that amount, right? So I can just use my reasoning to pick out the right answer. I don't have to, even in math, we're saying you're doing a certain amount of numeracy, which is like literacy with numbers, right? And you're also making predictions about what they're actually asking you, especially in word problems that are semi-real life, like volume or the area that you're painting. You want to imagine the story so that you can say which answer makes sense, even without doing all of the arithmetic. But as we go over to hemisphere, you already said that the radius was 10. So now we're on 10 times 10 times 10.
So in other words, I just stayed halfway done.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Oh gosh. All right. I just have to make sure.
If it makes sense, because what we're saying is when you're doing 50-ish questions and you have 70 minutes, sometimes we're saying, like we did in class, can you do this question in 1 minute, 2 minutes? And then move on, right? Now, we also said maybe there's 5 questions that you never even are going to do because it's just beyond what we did in class and you just don't know the numbers or the symbols and you don't have any idea what they're talking about. For a question like that, you're straight guessing anyway. So actually in those 5 questions, you have a chance to guess correctly, but you also save the 1 to 2 minutes because you're not even gonna worry about thinking about it. It's like saying you've never read Arabic or Chinese. You can look at it all day and try to interpret it if you want, but you don't have any basis for the language. There's no point in doing that on a timed test, right? It's better for you to just say, I don't know this one, it's A. I don't know this one, it's C. And move on, because if every question you are supposed to take 2 minutes, then, you've got 50 questions, you've got, that's your 90-minute test. But that's why some of the questions are, a painter is going to paint the wall. What is the best type of measurement? You're like, okay, great, it's definitely square feet. A question like that, as soon as you are done reading, you know the answer. So that's the one that takes you less than a minute. So you end up averaging. Some are going to be less than a minute. Some are going to be less than a minute because you know them. Some are going to be less than a minute because you don't know and you are straight guessing for about, 3 to 5 questions. And then the other ones are where you're going to spend your 2 to 3 minutes. So that's what we're saying is one like this. If you can spend 2 minutes and say 1 minute took you to do the cylinder question, that might be enough to actually pick out the answer. Because the other thing that is to your benefit is that you have multiple choice. So in this case, when you get 3, 4, 5, 4, the answer has to be D. But what we are looking at is what is the hemisphere, right? So if you are on, I'm going to multiply 1.333 times 3.14. And the easy thing to do in this parentheses is the 3.14 times 1,000, right? Because you're just moving the decimal point. So if we said we memorized pi as 3.1415, you're just going to say, okay, if the point was here, 1, 2, 3 zeros. Now the point is here. And again, this is just you memorizing and moving decimals. So now what you're saying is, I'm going to multiply the 1.333 times the 3.141.5.
So the 1,000, where you get the 1,000 from?
That was the radius cubed. So we had already said the radius was 10. And over here,
okay.
100. So
yeah.
For the cubed, we know it's 1 more 0 is 1,000. So it depends again how many 3s you put in, but this is the number that I got. And I'm still, remembering that I'm going to take half of that because that's the whole sphere. So this is an about again, because it depends. You've got pi that you're rounding, and you've got the 1.333 that you're rounding, but I got about 2,093. So what you're thinking is that 2,093 plus the cylinder, the 3,454, and you're saying it's about 5,547. But again, we didn't have to come up with that to get D in this particular case, because as soon as we got halfway through, it made the answer obvious. So now we're just saying we're going to be scientific, right, and systematic in selecting our answers. Because it's one thing, there's a lot of levels, like we said, to guessing. One level is, I don't know this, like we said in class, I'm going to pick my favorite letter. My favorite letter today is C. So that's one kind of guess. But then the other kind of guess is, can I get this in 1 minute going halfway through based on what I understand? If I know that the volume of a composite figure is to add up 2 volumes, then what am I thinking? Once I get 1 volume, it has to be more than that. But like we said about number 1, it's not going to be that much more, because one other thing we know about the pyramid is that it's 1/3 of a box anyway. So if I get 480 for the box, I should have less than 480 for the pyramid. Now this is all still not figuring out the exact numbers, but just reasoning with the math. If I do number 2 and I get the cylinder as 3,454, now just reasoning, it has to be more than that, not less than that. So when I'm looking at my 4 choices, 2 of the answers are less than, like Gladys said, those are definitely eliminated. One of the answers is the cylinder, but that's also eliminated because I need to add up 2 shapes, which means I have to get more than the cylinder. But I don't have to do that figuring that we just did for hemisphere. On a real test situation, I don't have to do it. And the only reason we just did it was for the practice of doing the formula and doing the order of operations. Even in class, you wouldn't have to do that. Because what we're saying is, even on the math test, it's great that you know how to do the order of operations. It's great that you already know 10 times 10 is 100, and 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000, but that's not what the real test is about. You know, all of these tests are about your thinking and your reasoning. They're just using social studies and then using math and then using science to see, can you follow directions? Can you reason? Because this is why this is some type of pre-qualification for school or for work, because they're really saying, what kind of thinker are you? If you get to 500 points, that means you can reason well, and I could be able to train you for work or train you for school or have you go into a field and get, you know, specialized information. So when you go to take the test, you want to be in the best mood. You want to have drink your water. You want to sit up straight so that you can breathe well, so that your brain is getting oxygen, right? And you want to say, this is a reasoning test that is using my basic math skills, which is
The test has to be at 7 o'clock in the morning, so I can work better.
But those things are real, right? Now, I think they might offer a lot of times when we go back to try to catch people up. That would be the generous thing. If the college did that, or if other testing centers did that, those are real things for you to know about yourself. I'm a morning person versus a night person, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can say, let me do the test in the morning. When I get up, I'm going to be alert. Even if I'm not, maybe I'll just do the multiplication on Math is Fun, right? I'm going to do some kind of drill that has me in a good mindset, and I'm ready to take the test in the morning. Mm-hmm. And also about, you know, like thinking about the test anxiety. And we'll talk about some of those things like this month, as we think we're going to go back to school at some point, so that whenever a testing center opens, you are dealing with some of the other things. Because without a doubt, when you take a test, you probably know an answer, and a lot of people might just be nervous, right? So this is why when you're doing the test, you're reading. What is the approximate volume of the observatory? Just when they say words like approximate, that's rounding anyway. You know, so if you can go with what you do know for sure, that can get you through half of the test. Don't discredit, you know, what you do know. Sometimes people play down what they do know, you know, in an effort to be like, I forgot the hemisphere. Then just say you forgot it. What do you know based on just the cylinder, right? Mm-hmm. Because that could actually get you an answer. Mm-hmm. So far, what we did yesterday and today is all the perimeter and the area and the volume. So now this one, where we're going with surface area, is the same thing. And I think surface area is the most complicated one, only because it has you have a lot of faces. So this is what you have to think back again. If you are painting the 3D shape, it goes back to adding up all the area. And that's why they're calling it surface area, to make a difference. So they're using that example. We saw the other examples could have been glittering, tiling, you know, painting, anything like wrapping the box with wrapping paper. So anything that's going to go all the way around the 3D shape is surface area. And they're starting with prisms and pyramids. So the first step all the time is always to identify the shapes. Here you are saying, when you're painting this composite figure, this is where you have to be mindful of what you're actually looking at. Because this one is saying, identify the faces that make up the figure and the correct formula. So for the prism, you can see there's a front, a back, a left, a right, and a bottom. There's no top because the pyramid's on top of the prism. Right? So everybody's clear with that one, right? Typically, the box would have 6 sides. We know that. But in this case of a composite figure, you're only going to paint 5. But the same thing is going to happen with the pyramid. You're only doing the 4 faces that are triangles. You're not going to do the base because that's connected to the prism. So now that you've figured out what you're actually going to be painting, step 2 is to substitute everything. So for the prism, you've got the front is this shape. And now this is where you're using your imagination again. 7 times 11 is the front. So they've got the front and the back at 77. But now the left, 7, because the bottom is a square, is the same, 7 times 11. So now you've got the left and the right is 77. Now, what is the bottom that you're going to paint is 7 times 7. So that's 49. So all you're going to do is add up everything for the prism. Then you have the pyramid. You're doing the 4 faces. So you have 7 going across times 9, which is the lateral surface area. So 7 times 9, and you have that. 7 times 9, 7 times 9, 7 times 9, and they're saying 2 times the 7 times 9 to be the 4 triangular faces. Because that is the idea of taking half, right? So just like we said about the cone and the pyramid, you're taking a part of the original shape. So the triangle is half of a rectangle. So what they're saying is if you do the lateral surface or the lateral face, which is not from the vertex to the middle, it's to the edge. So even in a picture like this, you have to make sure that you're realizing when they draw the right pyramid right here, it's coming all the way to the edge of the front face. That's the slant. When they draw them the other way, let's see if we can find one, like this, where the right angle comes into the middle, that's how you know it's coming from the middle point straight to the middle of the box. And that's a right angle straight down. That's the height of the pyramid, right? So in this case, you don't need the height of the pyramid because you're on the surface area. You need the actual slant of the triangle. So now-
the middle there is the vertex, right? Is that
right.
called the vertex?
Exactly. So the point at the top is the vertex. Trying to see the middle, and this is 2-dimensional. They're trying to draw a 3-dimensional shape. So this is why it takes your imagination, because you have to say, oh, okay, did not stop right here at the middle. Like 9 is not the height. 9 is the slant of the triangle that's on the face, right? That's the number that I'm going to use is the 9 times 7. And then I'm saying I just need 2 of those. That counts for all of the 4 faces.
Oh, okay.
So now this is a way that this is because there's a lot of ways to look at this. If you have 4 of them, you don't need to take half. So this is why they're showing right here. You can take half of the 4 and say, I'm going to do 2, rather than take half of the triangle and then add up 4 anyway. It's kind of like you're saying, I'm looking at the triangle and I'm just going to act like it's 2 squares instead of 4 triangles. So it's all the way, again, that you're thinking about it and reasoning, because you're going to get the same answer if you take half and add up, 4 of them, or if you just act like it's 2. So this is adding up the 77, 77, 77, 77, 49, and 126 to say it's 483 square centimeters. And you're back to square centimeters, even though it's a solid, because you're talking about the surface area of painting. So you want to make sure that you're looking at that too, because sometimes that could be the difference. Like we saw when we did the task exercise, the one answer could be 10 square centimeters, and the other could be 10 cubic centimeters. And the only reason that you would pick one over the other is whether you're talking about area or surface area or actual volume of the shape. So now this is the same, hemispheres and cylinders. So that's where we are looking at example number 6 right now. But we are going to do this think about math and this one in the margin tomorrow. And then we will start the vocabulary. So we're at the end of this section. These are the last 2, but you're still looking at surface area. So same thing with this shape. You're in step number 1, they're saying minus one of the circles because you don't need the top circle. You only need the bottom circle. So you're just going to be mindful, if it's surface area, how many sides do you really need to count in the shape? if the shape is made up of 2 or 3 other shapes that are stacked on top of each other for some reason, right? Some composite solid, what do you actually need to consider? So we're gonna do these 2 tomorrow, or this one that's gonna think about math, and then this one that's over here about the tower. And then we'll go into the vocabulary and see how many of the skill review we can do. And then this is what we're gonna work on for the rest of the week. So when I put it up today, I'm just gonna go over the examples. So when I put it up on Google, it'll just say the examples that we looked at and the pages that we read up until. And then we're just saying still that Khan Academy and Aztec. And if you redo something on Study Jams, that is what your homework is. And then you're just getting prepared for the class tomorrow. You can do as many as you want. I think we can probably get through, you know, about 4 or 5 of them. So the goal is going to be to finish Thursday and then start the task exercise on Friday. But if not, we'll just push the exercise till Monday. So do you have any questions?
No, Mrs.
All
Why
right.
you have that background?
Yes, you know what? I was telling Gladys, I was on another Zoom call and they had virtual backgrounds. So I don't know if you actually, you can change your backgrounds if you want to. Maybe we'll have a day where everyone can pick their background. But they have some that are already in there. So they have like the bridge,
I like that one. I like that one.
outer space.
Golden Gate is my favorite.
They have, I think, video, where you have moving video in the background.
So distracting.
It is, right? It's a little distracting. How about this one at the beach? Waves in the background.
That comes with the Zoom, right? That doesn't come from your gallery, right?
It comes from Zoom,
Oh,
but you can add whatever you want to your gallery. So like my daughters added SpongeBob for their Zoom class.
that's nice.
So if you load a picture on your computer or your phone, you can put it up as your background.
Oh, okay.
So what we're gonna do is also kind of think of a project that we can do as a group and have the opportunity for you to do the teaching. So I know some people know how to share their screens and do all of that type of
How
stuff.
about the field trip?
Yes, you know, the field trip, the one we did was just for Earth Day. So I'm not sure how many people got a chance to follow that YouTube. It was happening live. So once you, I'll have to find the archived link. They were just doing the drone footage all around the Earth for Earth Day. That's what made me want to pick out drone footage for the ecosystems. So I'm going to share that on Google Classroom also right now. And we'll see what other kind of virtual field trips we can do. Maybe I'll put out a survey and we'll see what people want to vote for first. But that we're using video, drone to try to get the inside view in something. So I'm sure we can do it for science. That's what we're already doing, but we might be able to also do it for social studies. If there's some place you want to visit around the world, maybe we can go inside of a pyramid or something, since we're doing that for math. I'll put some out there, we can take a vote.
I thought, you know, the pyramid was a triangle. I never thought it was a square because I
Right.
never see it the
Mhm.
other way. It's like, I only see 2 sides. It's like, oh, I didn't know that.
And that's, right, those are the rules that we're learning, right? There are other kinds of pyramids, but the main one that we see is based on a square bottom, you know, with just the triangles being the sides. So that kind of thing is expanding your experience. That helps you answer questions. And the answer could be on multiple tests, right? So what you learn in one subject really could transfer to helping you answer a question on another subject. You know, it might be science that you end up doing, but maybe it's something that you just got out of reading that helps you answer the question. So again, this is why we're saying it doesn't matter what subject you like the most, because that's going to help you pass other subjects, right? If say you really love writing, that should help you read the questions better, because reading and writing tend to go together, you know? say you love reading and you can pick up your speed reading fiction, that speed can still help you on social studies and science, right? So you're going to use whatever you like to help you with the ones that you don't like so much. And then you're just going to use real strategy. That's a skill that you're building no matter what you're studying, is the strategy behind answering the questions, eliminating multiple choice, even keeping speed, because this is a time test too. So, you know, you can be like, hey, if I had all day, I'd get 700 points, but you only have 50 minutes.
How long is the test?
I believe most of them are in that 70 to 90 minute range. The writing test is the longest. I think it's like 105, 103 minutes, but that's because you have to write that essay for that about 40, 45 minutes. So you got the 50 questions, multiple choice, that's the grammar, but then you also have to write an essay. So that one is the longest test, which again, you wanna know that. So that if you're like, hey, I'm ready to go at 7 a.m., what do I need to have for breakfast to last the hour and a half in a testing mode?
But they don't have, wait a minute, they don't have tests at 7 though, right?
They don't.
No.
I was gonna say, you're gonna say, this is always at 9. I was gonna be sitting there.
But Zoila is ready for the test.